Our second protostome group are called the Ecdysozoa. This group is going to include our arthropods, which is our largest group of invertebrates, and our largest group of animals. The Ecdysozoa are named for the process of ecdysis. Ecdysis is molting. So these organisms are going to shed their outside skeleton or their exoskeleton. This is going to allow them to grow. So they periodically get too big for the exoskeleton, shed it, and then secrete a new exoskeleton, get a little bit bigger, shed it again, excrete another one. So this is going to happen in both of our groups, the nematodes and the arthropods. Both of these are characterized by a hard outer structure that's going to provide a little bit of support and protection. The general name for that exoskeleton is called a cuticle, and we'll see that cuticle in our different groups. Some of these organisms undergo metamorphosis, which is a change in their body structure. And if you need a review on metamorphosis, that'll be in video 1 for chapter 26. So we're going to start with our nematode phylum. All of our nematodes are going to be small pseudocoelomate worms that have this tough outside cuticle. So it's a kind of a stronger outside structure. Pseudocoelomate means that they have a body cavity filled with fluid, and their body cavity is only lined with mesoderm on the ectoderm side. One of the most common ones in biology, or at least studying biology, is called Caenorhabditis elegans. This is one of our model organisms. Model organisms are organisms that we study specifically to learn more about a particular group. C. elegans is often used to study development, especially nervous system and muscle development, other tissues, etc. Roundworms often cause disease in organisms, so we'll talk about a couple of those. Many of our nematodes are going to be parasitic, which means they require a host to complete their life cycle. There are a couple of specific examples here. Ascaris lumbricoides is one of the organisms that we see in our animal lab. This is an intestinal parasite that infects people around the world. It's the most common parasitic worm in humans. People living in tropical countries are at greatest risk for this infection. Sometimes you can see the infection, sometimes you can't, but it can make people very sick, basically affect the nutrients that are getting into their system. The other example here is causes elephantiasis. This is basically a swelling of a particular extremity, usually the legs, and it basically is a parasite that affects the lymphatic system, which is supposed to sort of help clear out and clean out your system. So when it does that, you basically get swelling and you don't get removal of fluids and waste from that particular area. Our largest phylum are the phylum Arthropoda, or the arthropods. They make up about 3/4 of all of the described living species on Earth. There are tons and tons and tons of them. They are the most successful phylum, and that is basically due to jointed appendages. And many of them have wings, and so they can fly. And this is going to be a really successful mode of locomotion because you can move over large areas, you can encounter new environments, and we're going to see, or have seen throughout the semester, that many of these are very closely tied with animals for tied with flowers for pollination and whatnot. So we talked about in the plant chapter, the KT event that was the asteroid that decimated most of the all of the dinosaurs many species on Earth. After that, the arthropods, flowering plants, and mammals really took off, and they all sort of evolved together, kind of a co-evolution between these flowering plants and arthropods or mammals that were required to disperse seeds and pollen and things for those plants. So we see lots of segmentation in the arthropods, and because of their segmentation and diversity of body characteristics, they've been able to inhabit all of the major biomes on Earth. So similar to bacteria, they are everywhere. There's pretty much no biome that doesn't have some sort of arthropod. So one of the key features that we see in arthropods is going to be cephalization. We see more extensive cephalization and diversity of the head region of the organism in our arthropods than any other organisms, especially until we get to our chordates, where we also have extensive cephalization. They have well-developed senses, and that is because of their head. They've got great eyesight, sense of touch, smell, hearing, and balance, and that is all because of a more sophisticated brain than we have seen in most of the other groups up to this point. So we're going to see these organisms diversify in both their body plan, the way they interact with the environment, and sort of their ecological impact. One of the key features of the arthropod is the exoskeleton. Their exoskeleton is made out of a combination of chitin and protein. Chitin has a roughly similar structure to cellulose in our plant cell walls. It is different. It's not the same thing, but you can kind of think about it as the same thing. It's a long chain of glucose that has been modified and basically reinforced so that it's a very rigid structure. And then part of that reinforcement is protein that is embedded into the exoskeleton. Exoskeletons range from extremely hard and tough to more soft and flexible. So if you think about a soft shell crab, their exoskeletons are soft enough that you can eat the whole thing. Doesn't mean you do, but if that is your thing. Others are much tougher. So if you think about a lobster, most people aren't going to attempt to eat that. Their exoskeleton is really hard, really tough. And the reason for that is basically protection. But it also provides physical structure. So instead of having the internal skeleton like we do, their hard, tough, rigid structure is on the outside. And then it also protects all of the organs on the inside. It is relatively impermeable to water, so it keeps water out of the insides, but it is permeable to gases. So this is going to be really important for getting oxygen in, carbon dioxide out through the exoskeleton. I've already mentioned it, but arthropods are extensively segmented. They have very specialized segments that allow for a variety of different characteristics. So that segmentation might be for specific movement, it might be for dealing with food or dealing with reproduction. We've got some examples of segmentation in different types of organisms. Of course, we're talking about arthropods, so we're going to kind of focus there. But our later evolving organisms, like our arthropods and our chordates, have much more segmentation than some of our others that either don't have segmentation or just have repeated, undifferentiated segments. So in our earthworm here, we've got these repeating, undifferentiated segments. They're all going to contain the same structures all the way down, basically just repetition. When we get to arthropods and then to our chordates, each of the regions is going to be very, very different. So we have the head region, the thorax, which is sort of the central region, and then we have the abdomen, which is kind of the back region. In that arthropod, in that lobster there, we can see all of the different segments. We have the head segment Here, that's of course where we're going to have our cephalization specialties, our more developed brain, all of our sensory information. And then each of the segments along here in the thorax are going to be specialized for food or movement. So you can see each segment is a little bit different. One has those big foreclaws that are going to be for protection and eating, catching prey, and then back behind that we've got some movement. And then in the back end we've got the tail, which also helps them swim, specialized for that. For our chordates, again, our thorax is going to be where most of the respiratory system is. For this fish, the movement is going to come from that tail as well. So general body plan of an arthropod, this is going to change depending on the exact phyla that we are looking at. They are going to have the head region, the thorax, which is going to have specialized structures for movement, and then the abdomen, which is going to have all of the posterior organs. In insects, we usually have fused segments called tagmata. Tagmata are fused segments, so they basically are not very distinct from one another. For our arthropods, in most semesters, I'm not going to expect you to know these subphyla of these groups. These are mostly here just so you can see some different types. Again, these are the most diverse type of animal. They are the bulk of our living organisms on Earth. So all of this is really just here to kind of give you an idea of the different types. I'm not really going to say too much. I'm just going to go through the slides. You're welcome to take notes or just keep watching. If I ask you to know something in any particular semester, it will be in your study guide or I'll announce it in class. So just if you are watching this because you missed class, make sure you check up and make sure I haven't required any of these groups specifically. Within our arthropods, we have the class Insecta. This is our insect group, and insects are important because they have more species than all of our other animals combined. So our previous two groups that we saw, the spiders and the millipedes and centipedes, are not actually insects. They are a different subphylum. But many of the insects that you are familiar with are clearly part of the insect group. I should say many of the little creepy crawlies that you're familiar with are actually part of the insect group. The big difference being that spiders are not insects. So all of our insects are going to have a head with antenna, a mandible, which is basically a mouth with a jaw-like structure, and 3 pairs of walking legs. So in other words, they're going to have 6 legs. So our spiders and our millipedes and centipedes don't count because they have more than 6 legs. If you look at table 26.5, this is going to be all of our orders of insects and their characteristics. That's mostly going to be for interest. Again, I'm just going to kind of pause on the next few slides with all of the organisms and let you kind of look at them, jot down some notes, and just kind of generally be familiar with what organisms fall into the insect class. So all of our insects are going to have wings. The wings in insects are a little bit different than the wings that we find in birds and mammals. The wings that we find in birds and mammals, so for example, a bat, and then all of our birds are going to be modified appendages, so modified legs. In insects, the wings are outgrowths of the cuticle, so they are not modified legs. They're a separate structure. And if you look at where they're positioned, coming out of the back of the organism instead of the side, like a chicken or a bat, you'll see that they are actually in a different location. So wings are a really fabulous adaptation, which is why we see it multiple times. We see it in insects, we see it in birds, and we see it in our bats, because it allows animals to move to much further environments. So it allows them to look for food, it allows them to look for new environments, new spaces to reproduce, things like that. So the distinguishing characteristic between our insects is generally going to be the different types of mouth parts that they have. So their mouth parts are going to be a little bit different depending on how they are adapted to their environment. So again, if you look at the table in your textbook for all the different types of insects, you're going to see some of the different mouth parts and their different essentially jobs that they do in the ecosystem. All right, so there are 35 different orders of insects, 100,000 different species in some of those orders. So just thousands and thousands of different types of insects. We can see some of the different orders here: beetles, bees, and wasps, flies and mosquitoes, butterflies, and moths. We also have, kind of pulling back a little bit in our arthropods, the subphylum Crustacea. So these are going to be organisms like our lobsters, our crayfish, things like that. They have extensively modified segments. They have walking legs, they have swimming appendages, they have lots of different sensory organisms and modified mouth parts, all to help them interact in their environment. Again, they have an exoskeleton on the outside, and then the head, thorax, and abdomen with all of their specialized segments for movement. Within our crustacean group, we have a whole variety of organisms that are not insects but have that hard outer shell. So there's a couple of them listed here for you.